7 decades since the Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered, around 80 new fragments of the ancient texts have been revealed to the public.
Are now being deciphered 2,000 years later, thanks in part to artificial intelligence.
For 70 years, the Dead Sea Scrolls were treated as ancient relics with nothing left to reveal.
We had a whole trove of literature that we never suspected existed.
Scholars believed every secret was already uncovered.
And that is a phenomenon that we see that affects the Dead Sea Scrolls no less than any other kind of archaeological artifact.
They were wrong. When a team fed the scrolls into a new quantum system, the machine exposed something no human had ever seen. It found patterns, warnings, and traces of a world that was never meant to return.
Standing here is like hearing the echoes of Bible times from 2,000 years ago.
Experts tried to control the results. Others demanded the research stop, but it was already too late. The cave they tried to erase. In the 2024, a group of experts arrived at the Qumran site near the Dead Sea. Their plan was simple. They wanted to use a new quantum imaging system to re-examine Cave 4. This cave is the most important of all the Dead Sea Scroll caves. The team wanted to settle old questions about the scroll fragments found there. They expected a normal archaeological survey. Instead, they walked into a place that felt wrong the moment they stepped inside. The air felt heavy. The walls felt disturbed. Something about the cave looked like it had held fear for a very long time. The new quantum imaging system was designed to detect chemical traces on ancient surfaces. It could reveal burn marks, water patterns, and hidden damage that older technology could not see. When the team began scanning the cave, the results shocked them. The floor showed long, narrow burn marks. These marks did not match a natural fire. They did not spread outward like a normal flame. Instead, the marks formed straight lines. The team explained that straight burn lines appear when someone applies fire directly to certain areas, usually to weaken or destroy something. This meant that someone may have tried to burn specific scrolls inside this cave. The scans also revealed dried mineral streaks on the floor. These streaks did not appear randomly. They formed straight and even patterns. The team recognized these patterns from ancient ritual washing sites. The Essenes, a Jewish sect believed to have lived in the Qumran area, practiced constant ritual washing. They also washed parchment to remove ink when they believed a text was impure or dangerous. The streaks in the cave matched this kind of activity. This suggested that someone had tried to wash ink from scrolls right inside the cave. The cave walls brought even more disturbing details. Some sections of the walls carried thin, shallow cuts. These cuts looked like marks made by small blades. They were not deep, but they were sharp. The team compared these cuts with the scraping marks found on some scroll fragments discovered in the same cave. The shapes were very similar. This suggested that ancient scribes stood inside this cave and scraped off writing from certain scrolls before hiding them. Scraping was a known method in the ancient world when people wanted to erase writing that they believed should not exist. These findings match real ancient writings from the Essenes. The community rule and the Damascus document warn followers to protect their teachings from outsiders. They describe traitors who might expose their secrets. They also describe the destruction of writings that were considered harmful. The physical evidence inside Cave 4 fits these descriptions with disturbing accuracy. The team also noticed the placement of jars inside the cave. Some jars were turned sideways. Others were placed upside down. This was strange because scroll jars were normally placed upright. The unusual position suggests that someone hid these jars in a rush. This matches the idea that people inside the cave may have been trying to protect something during a moment of fear or danger. Many scroll fragments from different centuries were also found mixed together. This did not happen through natural decay. It happens when people gather different documents quickly and hide them in the same place to confuse anyone who might try to sort them later. This strengthened the idea that someone tried to bury certain ideas under a pile of unrelated texts. Cave 4 no longer looked like a simple storage space. It looked like a place of fear. It looked like a place where someone tried to erase certain writings from history. If this cave carries the signs of panic and destruction, then the next question is clear. What kind of writings were the people trying to hide inside this dark chamber? To find the answers, they used the same quantum imaging system that exposed the strange marks in the cave. The Forbidden Library. This system was designed to read faint ink that had faded over 2,000 years. It could separate layers of writing and rebuild fragments that looked too damaged to understand. It worked by capturing tiny chemical signals in the ink and parchment. These signals helped the system rebuild missing lines and connect pieces that were once part of the same text. The first group of fragments came from writings that challenged the temple in Jerusalem. The quantum system revealed parts of teachings that supported a solar calendar. The Essenes believed the year should have 364 days. They said the lunar calendar used by the priests in Jerusalem was wrong.
These texts express a Judaism that Jesus and his followers were familiar with.
The system also rebuilt pieces of writings that criticized the priesthood. These writings said the priests had become corrupt. They claimed the priests allowed impure sacrifices and ignored sacred law. The system also uncovered early mystical teachings. These teachings discussed angels, heavenly mysteries, and hidden knowledge. They did not match the beliefs taught in the temple. These findings fit real Dead Sea Scrolls that are already known. The Temple Scroll rewrites the laws of Moses in ways that would have shocked the temple authorities. The Community Rule accuses the priests of betraying Israel. The War Scroll describes a final war between good and evil. The new fragments revealed by the quantum system fit the same pattern. They showed that the Essenes saw themselves as guardians of truth against what they believed was a corrupt leadership in Jerusalem. The cultural background of this discovery is also very clear. During the Second Temple period, Judaism was divided. The Pharisees believed in oral law and traditions. The Sadducees believed only in written law and rejected resurrection. The Zealots wanted to fight Rome with force. The Essenes chose to leave society and live in the desert. They believed they were the only group that followed God correctly. They believed the temple priests were unfit to lead Israel. Their writings showed deep anger toward the priesthood. The quantum findings matched these complaints. They showed the same frustration that appears in the known scrolls. The Bible itself also contains signs of these old conflicts. The book of Ezekiel accuses priests of breaking purity laws. The book of Jubilees, which was found among the scrolls, insists on a solar calendar and calls the lunar calendar an error that leads Israel into sin. These ideas appear again in the fragments reconstructed by the quantum system. This shows that the Essenes did not invent these debates. They were part of a long struggle over who had the right to define sacred law. Many of the fragments exposed by the quantum system contained teachings that did not agree with the Torah. They offered new laws and new interpretations. In the ancient world, this would have been seen as a threat. Anyone caught spreading such teachings could be punished. The Essenes may have hidden these writings to protect their beliefs from the temple authorities or from Rome. They may have feared that these texts would be destroyed. They may also have believed that these teachings should only be read by people who completed strict rituals and training. These forbidden teachings were only the first layer of mystery. When the quantum system examined the scrolls in a mathematical way, it uncovered something even stranger. It found a hidden structure that no person had ever noticed before, and it was not part of the surface writing. The Enoch pattern. The team wasted no time in programming the quantum system to study the scrolls in a mathematical way. This meant the system would read the shapes and placements of the letters, not just the words themselves. The goal was to see if the spacing, margins, and letter counts followed any hidden structure. No one expected the system to find anything unusual. What it discovered shocked the entire group. The quantum system worked by measuring the distance between every single letter on a scroll. Ancient scribes did not write with perfect spacing. They wrote by hand. Their spacing normally changed from word to word. The system compared the spacing on each line. It looked for repeated distances that did not match normal handwriting patterns. The system found repeated spacing patterns on multiple scrolls. Some letters were placed in a rhythm that created a repeating number sequence. These numbers appeared again and again. They did not match normal writing style. This meant the spacing was intentional. The system then moved to the margins. Many scrolls have marks near the edges. Some look like smudges. Others look like simple lines. The human eye cannot tell what they mean. The quantum system measured the distance between these marks. It found that many of them were separated by numbers that matched the solar year used by the Essenes. That year had 364 days. The marks matched this number so clearly that the team immediately saw the pattern. The Essenes taught that only the solar calendar came from God. They said that the lunar calendar used in Jerusalem was wrong. They warned that a wrong calendar would break the link between heaven and earth. The margin marks supported this belief because they appeared to mark the count of days in the solar year. This meant the scribes were tracking time in a way that followed their sacred system and rejected the one used by the temple priests. The quantum system continued to search through more fragments. It then found another pattern. This time it came from the number of letters placed between specific words. The system counted how many letters appeared between repeated key words such as light, season, and appointed time. These counts formed repeating number groups. The groups appeared in sets of 19, 5, 8, and 11. When the team compared these groups to known astronomical cycles, the numbers matched the Metonic cycle. The Metonic cycle is a 19-year pattern used in astronomy to make the lunar calendar and the solar calendar work together. The Essenes never used the lunar calendar in public. This made the discovery shocking. It meant the scribes were secretly tracking the lunar system while pretending to reject it. This exposed a darker truth about the group. It showed that they hid knowledge from their own community. It showed that only high-ranking members knew both systems. It suggested that they were watching for a rare astronomical event that the temple priests would not see. It also suggested that they believed time itself had become unsafe or broken. The hidden number groups revealed the signs of a private timetable that they did not want outsiders to understand. These patterns were built into tiny spacing choices and faint marks that no one had ever noticed before. The Bible also contains similar ideas. Deuteronomy speaks of heavenly tablets that record cosmic law. The Book of Jubilees repeats this idea and says the festivals were placed on these heavenly tablets. The Book of Enoch even describes stars as living beings that can break rules. These beliefs match the Essene obsession with keeping the calendar pure. The most disturbing result came when the quantum system compared the numerical patterns with historical events. Some of the cycles lined up with ancient eclipses, others lined up with rare solar events. The most shocking alignment related to the fall of Jerusalem in the year 70. The Essenes believed the temple leaders had corrupted sacred time. The patterns suggested that their warnings were tied to real events. These discoveries showed that the patterns were not random. They looked like a system. They looked intentional. The mathematical patterns were only the beginning. When the quantum system continued its work, it found something even more shocking. It rebuilt a scroll that scholars once believed had been lost forever. The scroll that shouldn't exist. The quantum system moved deeper into its analysis. It began to search for fragments that did not match any known scroll. These were pieces that scholars could not connect to existing manuscripts because they were too damaged or too faint. The team instructed the system to rebuild any writing that appeared underneath the visible layers. This meant the system would search for erased ink, hidden strokes, and writing that had been scraped off and overwritten long ago. The system used chemical signals trapped in the parchment fibers. These signals came from ink that had soaked into the material. The system combined these signals with microscopic traces of faded letters. It also detected very small marks from earlier writing that had been covered by later scribes. By joining these clues together, the quantum system produced something the team never expected. It produced a nearly complete manuscript that scholars believed had been destroyed 2,000 years ago. The content of this reconstructed scroll was disturbing. It resembled several known Dead Sea Scrolls, but it pushed beyond them in shocking ways. The style reminded the team of the War Scroll. That scroll describes a final conflict between forces of light and darkness. The new manuscript used similar language but with more intensity. It spoke of cosmic battles that involved both human and heavenly beings. It described violent judgment against leaders who corrupted sacred law. It also resembled the songs of the Sabbath sacrifice, which portrays angelic beings in vivid detail. The new manuscript went even further. It described heavenly beings standing in strict ranks, their bodies shining like metal heated in fire, with faces that did not resemble human features. Their voices caused trembling in the air. Their movements followed the same patterns as the stars above. These descriptions were written as direct observations rather than symbolic language. In the ancient world, this level of detail was considered forbidden because it revealed the inner structure of the heavenly realm. Another section of the manuscript resembled the Apocryphon of Jeremiah. That text reinterprets prophetic visions from the Bible. The new scroll did the same, but its warnings were stronger and more direct. It accused the temple leaders of turning away from divine truth. It also listed purity laws that were more extreme than anything found in known Essene writings. These laws required levels of separation that would have been impossible for normal people. They also suggested that only a very small group was worthy of receiving heavenly knowledge. The rules were harsh and showed deep fear of spiritual corruption. One law demanded complete physical distance from anyone who followed the lunar calendar. The Essenes believed the lunar system broke the link between heaven and earth because it created a festival schedule that did not match the movements of the sun. They believed God fixed time according to the sun. They taught that any worship done on the wrong day was considered false. Anyone who followed the lunar calendar was seen as living outside the divine order. The Essenes feared that contact with such a person would spread spiritual disorder. Another law required members to eat only food prepared by someone who had not touched water drawn during a forbidden moon phase. A forbidden moon phase meant any point in the lunar cycle where the moon's position did not match the Essene solar calendar. They believed that water touched during these phases carried impurity. They also believed impurity could enter the body through food and drink. This meant that even clean food became unsafe if it was touched by water drawn at the wrong time. A third law said that anyone who heard temple music in Jerusalem needed 7 days of purification. The Essenes believed the temple rituals were corrupted because they followed the wrong calendar and were led by impure priests. Temple music was part of these rituals. Hearing it meant being exposed to what they saw as false worship. 7 days of purification matched the severity of impurity described in the Bible for contact with death or severe defilement. To the Essenes, the corrupted temple was just as dangerous. Another rule said members must avoid speaking with anyone who had walked on ground touched by a Roman soldier. Romans were seen as a source of impurity because they were Gentiles. They controlled the land by force, and they placed idols and unclean symbols in many public areas. Their presence represented foreign domination, spiritual pollution, and moral collapse. The Essenes believed that even indirect contact with land touched by Roman feet carried impurity that could weaken the holiness of the community. The Bible contains similar conflicts.
During the period the scrolls were being created, the Hebrew Bible, for Christians the Old Testament, was still a work in progress.
Isaiah condemns corrupt leadership. Daniel describes visions of future kingdoms and heavenly messengers. Ezekiel describes strange heavenly beings and divine structures. The manuscript echoed these themes, but it pushed further into territory that ancient leaders would have called heresy. This helps explain why someone tried to erase it. Yet even this forbidden scroll was not the most shocking discovery. The true breakthrough came when the system compared its astronomical tables with real historical events. This comparison revealed a pattern the ancient scribes may have understood far too well. The Jerusalem Warning. The team wanted to understand why the astronomical tables inside the reconstructed scroll were so detailed. They asked the quantum system to compare the numbers in the scroll with real historical events. The system did this by placing the scroll's cycles on a timeline. It then compared each cycle with known records of eclipses, sky disturbances, and events recorded in ancient history. The result shocked everyone. The cycles lined up with the years leading to the destruction of the Second Temple in the year 70. This meant the Essenes may have believed that the fall of the temple was not random. It meant they may have believed it was part of a fixed cosmic pattern that they could calculate. The system began with the 19-year sequence found earlier in the scrolls. It placed the first part of the sequence at the starting point of the Essene solar calendar. The cycle repeated several times and ended exactly in the period of the Roman siege. This siege destroyed Jerusalem and wiped out the center of Jewish worship. The match between the encoded cycle and the historical disaster suggested that the Essenes believed the temple would fall at the end of that cycle. It also implied that they believed the leadership in Jerusalem had caused the nation to fall out of alignment with divine time. The quantum system then compared the encoded cycles with writings by the ancient historian Josephus. Josephus recorded unusual signs in the sky before the temple fell. He described a bright light above the sanctuary and a strange comet. Modern scientists believe this may have been a solar or atmospheric disturbance. The quantum system compared Josephus's dates with the scroll patterns. The dates lined up. This suggested that the Essenes believed the sky would reveal warnings before a national disaster. It also implied that they used sky patterns to confirm their belief that Jerusalem had entered a period of judgment. The War Scroll contains dramatic predictions that were once viewed as symbolic language. It describes smoke rising from the sanctuary. It describes a turning in the heavens. It describes the fall of corrupt leaders. When the quantum system matched these images to solar cycles, the parallels were clear. The encoded cycles pointed to the same years that the War Scroll described as a time of crisis. This meant the Essenes did not write these texts as poetry. They wrote them as warnings they believed would come true in their lifetime. The cultural background makes this connection even clearer. In the decades before the temple fell, many Jews feared that disaster was coming. They believed the priesthood had become corrupt. They believed the rituals were no longer pure. They believed Roman rule was a sign that God had withdrawn protection from the nation. The Essenes believed they were the last group still loyal to divine truth. The encoded cycles supported their belief that judgment was approaching. The exact match with the temple's destruction suggested they believed the fall of Jerusalem was a direct result of spiritual failure. The Bible also contains similar warnings. The prophet Jeremiah said the temple would fall if the nation refused to change. The prophet Daniel described a moment of desolation inside the sanctuary. The later teachings of Jesus predicted that not one stone of the temple would remain standing. These ideas existed long before the scrolls were written. The encoded cycles indicated that the Essenes believed these prophecies had a measurable timetable. They believed that history followed a pattern that repeated through time. The most disturbing discovery came when the quantum system continued the cycles beyond ancient history. The encoded patterns did not end in the year 70. They continued for many centuries. One of the later cycles matched a solar disturbance recorded in the year 2012. This event was captured by modern satellites. It involved a sudden change in the sun's magnetic field. The match suggested that the Essenes believed cosmic cycles would continue long after their generation died. It also implied they believed these cycles controlled more than their own era. They believed the cycles shaped empires, natural disasters, and major religious periods across human history. The team realized the Essenes may have believed they had uncovered a framework that connected the heavens with the fate of nations. They believed the collapse of Jerusalem was only one part of a much larger pattern that continued far beyond their time, but nothing prepared the researchers for what came next. The quantum system detected a buried layer of writing beneath the visible text. This hidden writing contained ideas older than the Bible and appeared to have been erased with great effort. The quantum discovery forced the researchers to face a reality they were not prepared for. The scrolls had carried two voices for 2,000 years. One voice was visible, the one the world had always known. The other voice was buried beneath it, older, stripped away, and nearly destroyed. The system had brought that buried voice back to life. It described a world of many divine beings, a world where power was divided among forces that were erased from history. The team realized they were not looking at a commentary or a forgotten poem. They were looking at the remains of a belief system that someone fought to wipe out. The final truth was simple and frightening. The history of God as we know it did not begin with one story. It began with a silence created by human hands. And now that silence has been broken. Thank you for staying with us to the end. Please subscribe to the channel for more informative videos.